Hello, everyone, and welcome to AFP ICON 2021. My name is Wayne Olson, and our topic today is fundraising for nonprofit board members, getting them on board to reach fundraising goals. It's one of my favorite topics. It was the subject of my most recent book, and I love the topic of engaging and getting your board members to be excited about fundraising. Now, I know this can be a difficult subject. It's hard to get board members to fundraise, but hopefully by the end of the time we spend together today, we will all have a better idea of how we can engage our board members and get them on board with fundraising. So with that said, let's get right to it. Again, my name is Wayne Olson. I'm an attorney and I'm a gift planning officer with Intermountain Healthcare Foundation in Salt Lake City, Utah. I encourage you to reach out to me. You can reach me at my work email address at wayne.olson@imail.org or my home email address, wayne@wayneolson.com. My Twitter handle is @WayneRO, and you have my phone number on the screen. So I hope you ask questions during the session, and I'll try and answer those for you on Slido. But if at any time after the session you have any questions, always feel free to reach out to me. My goal is to help you. So, with that said, I've got 3 goals for our time together today. The first goal is to put fundraising in a proper perspective. The second goal is to talk about fundraising and how it relates to your board. And lastly, how we can put this all together and move forward to a happier, healthy board and a happier and healthier organization. So, what are some proper perspectives where we can begin our discussion of fundraising for nonprofit board members? First, remember this maxim: donors give to sincere people more than they give to technical specialists. I am a plan giving officer. I live in the world of technical speciality. Your donors, your board members, and many of your fundraisers may not. When you're talking to your board members, please remind them that they don't have to be wizards in fundraising. They just have to be sincere and willing to tell the story to people who will listen. You don't have to be a technical specialist. All of the successes I've had in fundraising over the last 20 or more years have been from my people skills and not necessarily from my plan giving skills. It's all about being sincere and passionate for what we believe in. Also, let your board members know that if we miss out on fundraising, we're missing out on a lot. This is from the Bank of America study a few years ago that says by the year 2055, more than $41 trillion are going to pass hands in the United States. There's several other studies and several other articles about this, and they all say about the same thing. The point is, there's a lot of money in this country that's going to be transferred from one generation to the next in the not too distant future. And as that transfer happens, there will be incentives for them to include charities like yours in their plans. So it's important that we be prepared to help them and be part of that transfer and help them reach some of their philanthropic goals when that transfer happens. And of course, remember, it happens one at a time. The average age of a charitable donor in this country is 62. It's probably, maybe, the average age of your board members. Remind them that the people they're going to be talking to are their peers, and they should feel comfortable knowing that and doing that. And remind them that people love to give. This is from Giving USA, and it shows how people have given for about the last 50 years in the United States. And you can see, with very few exceptions, during rough economic times, giving has gone up every year. This is the most recent statistics. The 2020 stats are about to come out, but they're not out yet. But so far, it's up and up and up. And I understand that 2020 is going to be a better year than 2019 for charitable giving. Also, there's a lot of misconceptions about board members, or from board members, on where money comes from. When I talk to board members about fundraising, the first thing they talk about is what corporation shall I hit up to ask for money. As you can see from this chart from Giving USA, and this is consistent year after year, 68% of all donations in this country last year, or the last year we have records for, 2019, came from individuals. If you add bequests to that, which also come from individuals, you're at 78%. More than 3/4 of all gifts in this country come from individuals. And of course, when I'm talking to my staff or other people about fundraising, I also remind them that foundations and corporations are actually nothing but a collection of individuals. The bottom line is donations to your cause are going to come from individuals, and you need to let board members know if they plan on hitting companies for money. I hate to use that word, but it's one I hear a lot. You're better off engaging with and building relationships with individuals who will be your best and most loyal donors. Something else to remember too, and this is true for us as staff members and true for board members. As a staff member, and I use the American Cancer Society as an example, an organization that I love, we get our checks with the logo of our organization on the check. So we get our checks from the charity. The board, if they're giving to the charity, which they should, make their checks payable to the charity. We're on the opposite side of the check writing here. We receive checks from the charity if we're on staff. Some of us receive bigger checks than others. And the board member is the one making checks payable to the charity. I think the Cancer Society is going to do better than this year. Let's change that around a little bit. That's a more appropriate donation for them. We're always going to look at this from different points of view. So when we talk to board members about fundraising, we always need to remind ourselves, and they remind themselves, that we're always approaching the act of fundraising from two different points of view. One of us receives money from the charity, the other gives money to the charity. And we have different and similar roles. If you have a CEO and a board chair, as I depict in this photograph, they each do some similar things, but many different things. The CEO's responsibility is to run the nonprofit from day to day. The CEO also hires and manages staff, and sometimes fires staff, and takes the goals from the board and translates them into action. In addition, the CEO, or the head of the charity, is going to report back to the board on whatever progress or setbacks have happened since the board last heard from her. And, as we discussed earlier, she received checks with the organization's name on it. And, of course, one of her prime duties is fundraising. Now, your board chair on the other side of the picture is not at the charity every day. Even if she's a frequent volunteer, she's not going to be there as likely as the CEO. Now, the board is going to set long-term goals for the CEO. They don't do the day-to-day. They set the long-term goals and ask the CEO to achieve them. And they have one employee, the CEO, and they're responsible for hiring and firing that CEO. And ultimately, the liability for the nonprofit rests on the board's shoulders. And of course, if you're a board member, you should give to the charity that you're on the board for, and you're going to pay checks to the charity, not from the charity. And of course, if you're a board member, one of your key duties, and it's the subject of our talk today, is fundraising. When you put those two together, you have a great and successful nonprofit organization. So now that we have a background with some proper perspectives, let's move forward into fundraising and how it works for the board and how it works for the staff and what we can do together to make it the best it can be. Remind your board that we should never do things just because that's the way we've always done them. As a consultant, I used to see boards get in trouble all the time. And when they did, the most common reason they gave for doing something was, well, that's the way we did it last year, or that's the way we've always done it. Never do things just because that's the way you've always done them. That is one of the quickest ways to get into some serious trouble. Do things because it's the right thing to do. You know, this shows up in ways that we don't often expect. And when you tell board members not to do things the way they've always been done, remind them of some of these stories. If you say, God bless you, after somebody sneezes, that's a holdover from the Middle Ages when we thought it was a demon trying to escape from your body. If you wear a necktie today, that started from a battle in France 200 years ago when they hired Croatian soldiers and they wore neckties or scarves around their necks so they could tell who was on whose side. The scarf also had a knot in it so that it would prevent sword strikes from piercing the throat. And finally, women have buttons on the opposite side of their shirts from men so dry cleaners can charge them more, which is a real tragedy and shame. That's not right in any equation. It shouldn't be that way. That is a holdover from the time when it took women longer to get dressed because they had more elaborate costumes to put on to go out. So they had to have help, and the buttons were reversed so the person helping them could do it better. These are all things that we have in our modern society that are holdovers and relics from things long ago. Are there any holdovers and relics on your board that need to be looked at? That it's time to go? Women should not pay more for dry cleaning than men just because their buttons are on the other side of the shirt. And the good news is no one wears neckties anymore, so that's a good thing. And maybe we should say something else when somebody sneezes. Although I guess it's nice to say God bless you. In addition, remind your board how a nonprofit works. Nonprofit is a tax status. It's not a way of doing business. A lot of people believe that if we're a nonprofit, we have to be poor and act poor. We have to slum it. We have to do things kind of subpar with other organizations around the block or down the street. The nonprofit is only a tax status, meaning that if I give money to that organization, that I can receive a tax deduction for doing it. And there's other tax implications, but the bottom line is that it's just a tax status and not a corporate mandate for the way to do business. It is not something they should follow as a pattern. It just means that they have special tax exemptions that other corporations don't have. And remind them, too, that nonprofits account for about 10% or likely much more than that of our national economy. Nonprofit is big business. When you're meeting with the board and when you're talking with the board or about the board, whether you're a staff member or the CEO or the chair of the board, remember that every single board member matters. They all count. I've seen too many boards where there's 2 or 3 board members that really matter and the others just kind of show up. We need to remind ourselves, no matter where we are in the nonprofit, that every board member is just as important as the other. Every vote counts and no one gets 2 votes. If we remember that everybody is equal on the board, we will go so much further. And even the board member who joined when Richard Nixon was president, who's been on the board forever, still gets 1 vote. We need a board that's equitable, where everybody gets 1 vote and everybody matters. If we have a lopsided board, we're going to get lopsided results, and sometimes those lopsided results don't do anyone any favors, including the board and the nonprofit itself. Verbally tell every board member they matter. At every meeting, thank them and highlight one of their contributions that they made at that meeting. And remind board members that no one is too new or too inexperienced to ask tough questions. And even the founder, if say the founder of your charity is on the board, that founder still only gets 1 vote. No one is too new. No one is too old to get more or less than 1 vote. Everybody matters. Everybody counts. Tell your board members they matter and remind them and remind ourselves that 1 positive person can't make a board, but 1 negative person can sink one. We need everybody excited and passionate for the cause. And if we fail to do that, or if we let somebody on board that can bring the boat down, they'll do it. So keep everybody excited, keep everybody happy, and try to stamp out and prevent negativity on the board. And again, one of the best ways of doing that is reminding everybody how important they are to the success of the mission of the organization. As you tell every board member they matter, remember that everything should be designed for everyone to have an impact. Your board meeting should have an agenda where everybody has a chance to participate and everyone has a chance to do something good and to be active and not just be a spectator. And at the end of the meeting, or at the end of any involvement with your organization, your board members should go home feeling they've done something well and they've accomplished something for themselves and for the nonprofit. We need to look for those opportunities and give them to the board as much as possible. Remember that everyone on your board is a human being, and every human being wants to make a difference. They want to leave their mark on the world. I live in Utah now, and I don't have to go very far to see where people have written their names on the rocks hundreds and thousands of years ago. They want to be remembered. They want to tell their story. And these names and these images have been on rocks for hundreds of years. These people are no different than our board members, except they want to make their mark. Our board members want to make their mark with an accomplishment together with the mission of the organization. They're not going to write their names on a rock, but they are going to do something with your organization that's worthy of carving it in stone. As we tell them they matter, we also need to tell them that everybody must fundraise. There's no one on the board that does not get to not fundraise. In a minute, we'll talk about what that means, and it doesn't mean knocking on doors, but everybody has to fundraise. And that as a board member, with very few exceptions for very few organizations around the country, fundraising is probably your most important duty. However, we, the staff and other board members, are always going to do everything we can to make fundraising enjoyable and rewarding. If you're a staff member, remember your board members can be on several boards for years and still not know how to fundraise. Don't ever assume because your board member has been around for a long time, they know how to fundraise. And I'll give you an example of that in just a moment. Just because they've been on boards, they may not know how to fundraise. Because maybe no one ever told them how to fundraise well. And maybe they've never done it. Remind them and remind ourselves that fundraising is active, it's not passive. And it's not something other people do. It's what we do. It's our responsibility. It's our job to fundraise. And no one has the luxury or the pain of being a bystander board member. Everyone has to be active. Everyone has to do something on the board. You just can't watch the professional fundraisers on the board, the ones who are good at it, quote unquote, do it. You have to do it yourself. You have to be part of it. For the organization to be successful, we all have to chip in. That includes all staff and all board members. And remind board members that being on the board is serious business. And we can do our part as staff members by giving them respect and real responsibility. Often board members will come to me and say they've been given make work stuff to do, and that's not why they joined. But I've also had people tell me that they were doing things for the charity that were right up their alley and they loved it and couldn't wait for the next board meeting. That's the goal we need to shoot for. Give each board member real responsibilities and respect what they're bringing to you. And finally, I remember speaking to two CEOs of very large organizations who had joined a very prestigious board, and they were both talking about why they joined the board. And this is the pitch they both heard, and I'm afraid it's the reason they both joined the board. They said, I show up every 3 months or every quarter, and I get a very nice catered lunch for free. I vote yes when they ask me to vote yes, and then I go home. It's not a bad deal. And I get to tell everybody I'm on the board of this prestigious charity. That's not why they should be on the board. They're great people. They have a lot to offer, and yet they just show up, eat the lunch, vote yes, and go home. We need to do more than that. We owe them that. We owe ourselves that. We need to encourage our board members by showing them how to leave when they need to. I learned this expression more than 20 years ago. I give it to you for free today. Learn when to plaque and whack a board member. When you have a board member that's no longer contributing, that their usefulness was exhausted long ago, give them a plaque and whack them off the board. Dear Mr. and Mrs. Jones, or Dear Mrs. Jones, thank you for being on the board. You've been so wonderful for the last 25 years. Here is a trophy signifying and memorializing and honoring your 25 great years. Thank you so much for what you've done. We will miss seeing you at the board meetings. Plaque and whack. You owe it to yourself and you owe it to the board members who are pulling their weight that when you have somebody on the board that is dead wood, to get them off. And the best way of doing that is to recognize them for their contributions and to celebrate them by giving them a nice plaque, maybe a party, and then asking them nicely to retire from the board. You need to get people off your board that need to be off your board. We need to cultivate board members who bring energy to the board, not take energy from the board. Look for people in the community. Look for people among your volunteers who are energetic, who bring a passion and a fire to the board. Those are the people you want. We also want people who are kind, the kind of person that other people want to be around. Look for kind, gentle people who look out for others, because they're going to look out for the mission of the organization. And it's tempting to find a professional board member. We all have them around town, people who are on 3 or 4 or more boards, and they're really good at being a board member. And everybody knows they're great board members. I want board members who are on maybe 1 or 2 boards, and that's it. If you're on more than 2 boards, you're dividing your time among a lot of organizations and your donations. And we really need to concentrate our efforts in one area. If somebody wants to be on my board or your board, I would encourage you to make sure that they're only on one other board, maybe at most. That way, when they come to your board meeting, their mind is on your business and not on the other organizations that they volunteer for. As humans, we just can't divide ourselves well among that many organizations. So no matter how important they are, no matter how wealthy they are, if they're on all those other boards, you don't want them on yours. One of my favorite quotes: if you want to build a ship, don't drum up the men to gather wood, divide the work, and give orders. Instead, teach them to yearn for the vast and endless sea. When you talk about mission with your board, don't talk about statistics. Yes, you have to give those to them. They're going to want to know the square footage of your new building or the number of people you've served this month. That's very important. But tell them a story of one person who was touched by your mission. One person who is better off having encountered your organization than they were before. Fire them up in the heart and then feed the head. Give them passion for what you're doing, and you cannot stop them from fundraising. It's all about passion. We live in a passionate, emotional business, and we need to feed that to our board members. Tell them the stories of people that have benefited from your organization, and let them know that they were part of that success and that they can be part of the next success. As you're looking for board members, and as you're looking to train and encourage people who are already on your board, you want first to find people who believe in your mission. You want the true blue believers. And just like the person who's on 4 or 5 other boards, if you recruit people for their name only, oh, well, we need to go get Mr. Gotrocks because he's wealthy and everybody does what he says. Here's the irony. If you recruit a board member for their name only, because if we get him on our board, then everybody's going to come on board with him, they are going to get more from the nonprofit than they're going to give. Even if they're super wealthy, even if they're super powerful and super famous, if you hire somebody or bring somebody on your board, you don't hire them. If you bring somebody on your board just because of who they are and not because of their passion for the mission or what they can do for you, they are going to get more from being a board member than they're going to give. They are going to take energy from you, not give it. Please do not recruit or retain people on your board because they're famous, wealthy, or powerful. People on your board should be passionate for what you do. As we talk about board members, remember there are only 3 things that they can give a charity: time, treasure, and talent. That's it. Time, treasure, and talent. And we need to be mindful so that we shape things in these boxes. We know that they're going to give time, treasure, and talent. So how do we encourage them and make it easy for them to give these 3? And how do we reward and thank them when they do? Always value these 3 T's, their time, treasure, and talent. So how do we do that? First, we want to give them a nonprofit that values their time. We want to start and end our board meetings on time. That's very important. These are business people more than likely, and even if they're homemakers or just retirees, they still have other obligations. When we do not start on time or we do not end on time, we're showing them that we do not value their time. And also, even more importantly than ending on time, start on time. When we start a few minutes late as we're waiting for people to show up, we are not doing a favor to the people who are late getting there. What we are really doing is punishing the people who made the effort and made it on time. Do not start your board meetings late or any event late. When you do, you're not helping the people who had trouble getting there. You are punishing the people who did. Start on time to the second. Otherwise, your people who show up on time will start coming late and they will feel underappreciated because they are. So start on time and don't punish prompt people. At the same time, in your board meeting, have a zero distraction policy. No one should have a cell phone in their hands unless they are checking their calendar when a date is proposed for some future event. When I am on the phone during a board meeting, whether I'm a board member, the board chair, or a staff member, the signal I am sending to everyone in the room is whatever I'm doing on the phone is more important than you are. It is simply not true that we can multitask and be on the phone or text or social media and pay attention to what's going on in the board meeting at the same time. Of course, if we start and end on time, that time is economized and maximized, so there's less temptation to get on the phone or do other things. But it's really important for our board members to not only see that we're not wasting their time, but feel that we're not wasting their time because they don't see distractions in the room. And I think this should be a rule for everyone in the room that the chair makes at every meeting. Please put your notebooks and your phones and your media away, and keep your notebooks out to take notes. But anything else is a distraction and takes away from the dignity of the event. We want to value their talent. Look at your board members and see what they do best. What is their skill? What is their strength? If you've got a board member that's a racehorse, don't ask them to haul lumber. And if you have a board member that's a good bridge builder, show them rivers that need to be crossed. Make sure that when we have board members on our board, that we look for what they're good at and we ask them to do only and always what their skills match. Don't fill skills needed positions just because somebody doesn't have something to do. Try and either create or describe positions or look for ways to always match up somebody's natural skills and abilities with what's needed. And if you find that you have board members that have skills that aren't needed, think about your board and how you might make future decisions so that your board members more closely reflect what your needs and wants are for the organization. And also value their treasure. Don't ever take board member giving for granted. Always thank board members when they give. And if that's not enough, thank board members when they give. And after that, thank board members when they give. And thank board members when they give. It's so important to thank anyone who gives to our organization. We should especially be mindful of thanking our board members. Always thank your board members for giving. Even if they're on the board, we expect them to give, but that doesn't mean their gift is of any less value. Always thank your board members for giving. Let them know that you value their gift. We can't overemphasize the importance of thanking donors, and a board member is a donor. I have a friend who recently retired as the vice president of a nonprofit. He said, "Wayne, I haven't thanked a donor unless I've thanked them 7 times. That doesn't mean he shakes their hand and says thank you 7 times. It means he says thank you in a card, an email, a letter, over the microphone at an event, in person, whatever way it takes, but he thanks the donor 7 times. You'll never go wrong by thanking a donor more than enough for what they've done, especially if that donor's a board member. And give them action reports on how their donations and all donations are making a difference. Give them very specific examples of how their work is impacting the community. One thing I do in a newsletter that I produce for our nonprofit is something called Legacy Light Impact. I'm planned giving, so we deal with legacies, and we feature a donor each time and show our board and everybody what that donor has done for the organization. In this case, you can see we honored a very nice gentleman, Monty Call, and I also make it easy. At the very bottom of the newsletter, you'll see that I've divided it up into 3 columns. We talk about what gift he made, the purpose of the gift, and his goal for making it. Those are three things we can all relate to, and it's three things that every gift has. Make it very easy and quick to read so that the board members can know exactly what impact they've had by seeing a person, not a group of people, but one person who's benefited from what they've done. Here's the bad news. If we're going to ask board members to give, we have to give ourselves. We can't ask somebody to give unless we have first given ourselves. I give to my charity at least once a year, usually more often than that. But it's important for us to give. That doesn't mean we have to give a ton of money or an inordinate amount of money. We have to give something. We can't ask a board member to do something we're not going to do. I kind of like this saying that I came up with years ago because it describes what we do so well. People aren't going to buy a Ford from a salesperson who drives a Honda. And if we don't believe in the mission enough to give $10, why would anyone else give? We need to give before others will give and set the example. Which brings us to a very often debated hot topic. How much should a board member give? Should they give $5,000 each year? $10,000? Well, maybe $1,000, maybe $10, maybe $20,000. How much should a board member give? I'll give you a hint. The answer is none of the above. Do not have a set dollar amount for your board to give each year, and I will tell you why. Get rid of the threshold gift. The give or get thing from board members is poisonous to your board. I know it's a common thing for people to do, but it's not a good idea. It's forcing them to do something, and I don't think you ever want to force your board to do anything. And it has its own problems. I've talked to many boards and many staff members who talk about board members who promise year after year that they're going to make that required threshold gift, but they never get around to it. One of the keys to understanding your board is to take a very realistic approach. You need to look at it and say, we've been chasing Mr. Flanagan for the last 4 years. He's pledged us $20,000 a year over 5 years. He's not made the first pledge, and every year he's had a different reason why he can't do it, and that next year he would catch up. But he never catches up. And he never will. So just look at it realistically and say, we have several board members who've never given even though they've promised. They probably are never going to give. That's one good reason for abandoning a threshold gift. Here's another good reason. Don't embarrass your board members. There are people on your board who appear wealthy who are having a bad year. They can't even give what you would think would be an easy donation for them. Don't embarrass them. Don't make them explain to you that they can't make what would seem to be a small gift for them. When you embarrass them, they're going to want off the board as fast as possible. Or worse, they will get off the board to avoid being embarrassed. And it might be somebody who's very important to the success of your board and your organization. Don't risk embarrassing some board members. And you risk letting some give far below their ability. If you have a threshold gift of even $10,000 or $20,000 or $100,000, you'll have people on your board who could give $1 million who are very glad that your threshold gift is $100,000. Even if they give $150,000, they will feel they have done their part because that's what you have asked them to do. So on both ends, don't risk embarrassing people who might be having a bad year or not even the ability to give, and don't let people off the hook too easily who could give much more. When we come up with a number that we ask everybody to give or get, then we're asking for trouble. And I realize this is something that's common around the country, but I would encourage you to look at this realistically and think about it. And I'm also going to offer you a standard that I believe is much better. Every board member should give an amount each year, not once when they join, but every single year, that is personally significant. So let's do a little role play. A board member comes up to you and says, Wayne, What should I give? I realize that it says that I should give a gift that's personally significant. What does that amount mean? I would answer the board member, it's up to you. You have to define what personally significant means. And if she keeps asking me about that and what does personally significant mean, I would tell her, it's still up to you. It's not up to me. And here's the formula I would give to every board member who asks me this question. And I would give it at the first board meeting of every year. Personally significant means it's an amount you have to think about. If you can whip out a check or pull out a Venmo and make the donation immediately, your gift is not personally significant. If you can do it without thinking about it, it's not going to be personally significant. So hold on, think about it, and come back to me later with what you think is a personally significant gift. If you can do it that quickly, it's not enough. At the same time, if you're going to regret it the next day, it's too much. So find a gift where they have to think about it, where it takes a little bit of time, and the amount is not something they can just quickly whip out. It's got to be personally significant, but not enough to break the bank. That is the best threshold gift you can give to a board member, a gift marker you can give to a board member. It's got to be something personally significant that takes time to think about, but it's not something they will regret. That is a great standard that every board member can relate to. And as far as the give or get, this eliminates the give or get motto, where the board member has to give or get somebody else to give. If somebody can't give money to your organization, I wouldn't want to make them go out and get it from somebody else. In the same way, they could get $10,000 from the local corporation when that local corporation was going to give $100,000, but they were asked for 10, so that's what they gave, and they're done. The give or get model doesn't work. It gets some money, but it's going away money most of the time. Go for the real money. Go for the life-sustaining money that will propel your organization more than you can ever imagine, and give your board members a realistic target. Make the giving personally significant, which means they have to think about it, but it's not so much that they regret it. So, fundraising. What does this mean to board members? When we talk about the nuts and bolts of fundraising, one of our biggest challenges is everybody knows what fundraising is. I can pick up a guitar and start strumming it and make noise, but I know I cannot play the guitar. I can also pick up a paintbrush and some paint and put that on canvas, but I'm never going to paint a masterpiece. However, when you run into people and ask them what fundraising is or if they can fundraise, they know all about it. Just about everybody knows how to fundraise. I was doing a campaign when I was a consultant for a private high school, and I was meeting with somebody who we were going to ask for a $2 or $3 million gift, or we were thinking would provide a $2 or $3 million gift to the school. And the first question I asked this family when we met with them, the headmaster and I met with them, was, and I ask this whenever I meet with donors in a campaign readiness assessment, is why do you think we're here today? The family replied to me, well, we're here today to talk about fundraising. And I said, that's right, we're here to talk about fundraising. What does that mean to you? And she said, I assume you want to ask us whether we should sell wrapping paper or candy bars. It was very clear to the headmaster and me and to the board that most of the people that we would be counting on to make donations had no idea what was around the corner. They thought to build the new gym and the new science wing on the high school, we just needed to sell more wrapping paper and candy bars. That's not what fundraising is. Yes, a fifth grader or a fourth grader or a kindergartner may raise money that way, but it's not going to do what we need it to do. Fundraising is a lot more than that. Yet, too many people think they know what fundraising is and they can do it. They can pick up a paintbrush and they know they can't pick up a paintbrush and create a masterpiece, but they do think they can do fundraising well. What possible training could you have in fundraising? I mean, really, there's training in fundraising? It can't be. No way. There's books on fundraising? No. Our board members, at least some of them, think that fundraising is distasteful. These are some realities we have to face when we think about fundraising with our board. It's begging. Don't ask for me for money, and don't ask me to pester my friends. Real fundraising is not about any of this. It's not about begging, and it's not about asking somebody for money, and it's not about pestering friends. It's about coming together for a noble goal. It's heartwarming, and it's the physical expression of one of our most basic human emotions, care and compassion. Fundraising is about connecting with fellow humans. It's about doing something for the greater good and doing something maybe sacrificially for the benefit of somebody else. There's nothing more noble, there's nothing more grand than fundraising when it's done properly. We need to educate our board members on fundraising and look for ways to teach them fundraising. Include fundraising training at each meeting. Have 5 or 10 minutes of every meeting where you train the board on some aspect of fundraising. It only has to be 5 or 10 minutes. Just show them one small aspect, a chunk of fundraising that can be explained in 5 or 10 minutes. This is what an annual fund does. This is what annual fund does for us. This is what planned giving is. No, that's too much. This is what a charitable gift annuity is. Or this is what a major gift looks like. Keep it simple, keep it brief, and have at least some component of fundraising training at every board meeting. 5 or 10 minutes. And show them how it works in daily practice. Highlight one gift. If you're explaining how annual fund works, highlight one gift or one donor who's made an annual fund gift for the last 10 years. Show them how it works and what it means in reality. Hook up the theoretical with practical so they can see how it works together. And when you can, bring in outside experts on fundraising. Have one of your board meetings each year that's dedicated solely to fundraising. Get the updates out of the way, new business out of the way very quickly, and then have some aspect of fundraising that somebody is training your board on so they get a deeper dive into that aspect of fundraising. And at every board meeting, talk about particular donations that have come in since the last board meeting, maybe some small ones, maybe some large ones, but maybe some of interest. This person saved dollar bills in her mayonnaise jar for 50 years and gave us $100,000 last week, something like that. Show them how money comes in so that they get a very practical experience on how we fundraise, and they can take that home with them. As you continue educating your board members on fundraising, remind them that fundraising is only and always about relationships. It's the relationship between the donor and the fundraiser. It's between the staff and the board, and it's between the people sitting in this room, between in their room, the board members. It's all about relationship. It's this web of people and strings running between them that binds them all together. It's the relationships that count. It's the relationships that result in fundraising. It's not about a polished ask. So when we work with the board, we need to help them develop the relationships that lead to fundraising. That is each board member's key responsibility. We want to help show them how relationships lead to fundraising, and we want to empower them to build and create those relationships to make fundraising happen. Unfortunately, a lot of nonprofits still raise money as if we're in the greatest generation. When you were talking to donors in that era, the only thing you needed to do was be from an organization they've heard of and ask them for money, and they would give. They grew up in the Great Depression, World War II, and everybody was in it together, and they faced threats to their existence. So when you showed up and said, I'm from the Red Cross, the Salvation Army, or whatever organization with a national reputation, they would give because it was the right thing to do. Today it's changed. That was 100 years ago. The Depression and World War II is almost 100 years ago. Today, and probably always, it's been about relationships. It's about how we relate to one another and telling the story that compels people to give. It's not about how we ask for money. It's not about being slick and having the right things to ask. It's only about relationships, passion, and mission. That's all it is. It's that simple, but that profound. Here's some words I've never heard. Your brochure was so beautiful, I just had to whip out my checkbook and write a big check to you. I write brochures for a living, not only for my organization, but for other organizations through a publisher I work for. and it's a great joy, and I love doing it, and I put a lot of effort into it. And some of the brochures turn out pretty well, and they do a good job. But when a board member asks for literature or things to give to people, that's missing the point of relationships. The brochures, the websites, all the other stuff, it just supplements what we do. The first and only thing about fundraising is relationships. Yes, these are helpful. Yes, they get the message across. And yes, they might provide an action point for the donor to do something. But that only comes after the relationship has kind of lit the rocket. It's always about relationships. My son asked me to come up with a formula that describes my entire career in fundraising. And this is what I came up with. It's on the first page of my book, Big Gift, Small Effort. A donor will only give when the emotional satisfaction of giving is greater than the comfort of keeping. A donor will only give you an asset when the satisfaction of giving it to you is greater than the comfort of keeping it. I realized not long after I wrote this for him that, and he was only 8, by the way, it's wrong. Here's the right Olson's Law. A donor will always give, not only give, a donor will always give when the emotional satisfaction of giving an asset is greater than the comfort of keeping it. If we make it more satisfying for somebody to give us money than it is for them to keep it, we cannot stop them from giving us money. Doesn't matter how wealthy they are, doesn't matter how poor they are, doesn't matter what other obligations they have in their lives. If it's more emotionally satisfying to give, you cannot stop a donor from giving to you. We need to train our board with this saying, with this law. We need to make it emotionally satisfying for people to give. And when we do, we'll raise more money than we ever thought possible. As you're training your board members on fundraising, please encourage them never to use these words. We need your help. When we say, we need your help, those are the words that leave our lips, but it's not the words that hit the donor's ears. When we say, we need your help, what the donor hears is, we are helpless. We're not helpless. And actually, we don't need anybody's help. We're doing great things with our nonprofits, and we'll keep doing great things. The question is, do you want to join us and be part of that success? We're not going to go out of business without you in most cases. We're going to keep doing the wonderful things that we do. The question is, do you want to see us do more of it? If so, partner with us. Join us. We don't need you to support us. We don't need you to help us. We're just offering you an invitation to join us or partner with us to make things happen. Please do not ever use the words, we need your help. Instead, will you join us? Do you want to partner with us? Together we can accomplish blank. That's a far better way of training your board and our staff to fundraise. To recap, avoid framing the discussion as we need you. That's a one-sided transaction and is never successful. It's always what we can accomplish together. We will be successful when we talk about donations and fundraising and board membership is what we can accomplish together. It's not about us needing them. It's about us joining together to do great things. Donors, and here's some donors that I've worked with in the past, some great people on the left. They want to do things they cannot do. They want to teach children to read. They want to heal the sick. They want to feed the homeless. They want to give shelter to the homeless, or they want to feed the hungry and give shelter to the homeless. But you know what? They may not know how to teach people how to read. They certainly may not know how to heal people, and they may not know how to work in a homeless shelter or a soup kitchen. But that doesn't mean they don't want to do those things. So what they do is they give us their money and our expertise combined to make things happen. It's the partnership. It's not about us needing their help. It's about them having something and us having something that together makes a big difference. When you're looking for board members and training board members in fundraising, help them relax. Tell them, just be yourself. If you want to fundraise, share the passion of why you joined the board and why this cause is important to you. And tell other people why you were involved. When you go to your sons or your daughters' your school events or PTA meetings or whatever you're going to around town, Remind people and friends and acquaintances why you joined this board and why you give to this charity. And remember this too, it's your story. Whatever reason you joined is the reason you say. It's your story. Tell your story to anyone who will listen, and never be afraid or ashamed to tell it. Be a vocal and vibrant advocate for what we do, always. And as you're training your board, give them some general background information on what a nonprofit is and how it works. And explain how volunteers and donations work, and that no one owns the nonprofit, but you run it. A lot of people on boards don't know what a nonprofit is. There's a lot of misconceptions out there. A country club is a nonprofit. The Democrat and Republican parties are nonprofits, but they're not charities. They're not what we are. So explain to them how your 501c3 or 170c works and why it is different than Coca-Cola or Apple Computers or some of the other organizations that don't have the tax advantages you do. Give them some general basic nonprofit training, and then explain to them how volunteers and donations work. And then remind them that there's no shareholders in this nonprofit, but you, as a board member, run it. Inspire them. We all need some encouragement. We all need inspiration. If you want to kind of juice the engine a little bit, at your next board meeting, ask your board to think about the last time you gave to charity. And then, board member, what made you decide to give at that moment? How'd you feel after that? Bet you felt pretty good, didn't you? You want to do it again and feel good again? Do you want to share that good feeling with others? And can you tell others about how it felt to give so they might be inspired to do the same thing? Inspiration is contagious. And when we inspire our board members at meetings, they in turn will inspire donors and donations, and it goes on and on and on. Some good thought questions. Think about the last time you gave. Why'd you do it? How'd you feel after? And tell the story. Go out and tell the story. End every board meeting by saying, thank you for coming tonight. Now remember, go out and tell your story to the world. You know what? It'd be a good idea to give your board members training on storytelling. There's some great books out recently on storytelling. I can recommend some to you if you drop me an email. And at every board meeting, begin or end with a 5-minute session where one board member, and give each board member a chance as the year goes on, where they tell his or her story and why they came and why they joined. The neat thing is, some of these stories are going to surprise you and surprise the other board members. And they're all going to inspire. And when you're talking to your board members, don't make the common mistake that every board member is in tune with what's going on. I was at a meeting recently where the chair of the meeting was using some acronyms and abbreviations. And after the meeting, I asked somebody, I said, do you know what a GLM is or a ABC is? And he goes, no, I was hoping you would tell me. I found out that about half the people in that meeting had no idea what the board chair and the other 2 or 3 people were talking about, because none of us knew what the acronyms and abbreviations were. And the thing they were talking about, the activity they were talking about, they had talked about at length because they were on the committee talking about that thing, but none of the rest of us did. Yet, when they reported back to the board, they assumed that we were all on board and in tune with what's going on. And it was a waste of everybody's time. It was a waste of their time to tell us because we weren't hearing the message. We didn't know what they were saying. And it was a waste of our time because we sat there spinning our wheels trying to figure it out. Always start with the basics and don't assume that people know what's going on. Make sure that you brief so that even if somebody has not been at a meeting, they can catch up quickly. Remind your board members, inform your board members, they matter. If your board routinely approves everything every time, something's wrong. There needs to be discussion on some things. There need to be some things that are not approved. If everything is passed, then something is wrong. We need them to connect and feel important. And don't let things go along just because you want to get along. Don't approve things just because it's easier not to cause a fuss. If something needs to be discussed, or something needs to be turned down, or something needs to be approved that's controversial, well, talk it out and make sure you do. And don't let something happen just to get along. I've seen many great boards go over the falls and into disaster with everybody nodding in approval as the leader charted the course. No one stopped to ask any questions. It's so important to ask questions and not just go along to get along. Please ask questions and make sure every issue is debated at the board so that it's fully thought out. Remind them that they're not entitled to ask difficult questions. Your board members, especially the new ones, are not entitled to ask difficult questions. No, they're obligated to ask difficult questions. Difficult questions are what make boards strong. Everyone is obligated to ask questions that they feel they need to ask. You're not entitled to ask them. You must ask them. If you got something difficult to ask or to say, make sure you say it at the meeting. So as we wrap up, moving forward, putting this all together, heading out the door in the home stretch, when your new board member joins, clearly explain their expectations of their personal giving. Talk to them about a personally significant gift that they're expected to make this year. And explain to them how they're going to be asked to participate in fundraising, whatever that is. It's going to be unique to your organization. And tell them that they need to be involved. They need to participate, not spectate. Fire them up and tell them how important they are and tell them that we need you. And you're going to help us with fundraising in a way that's comfortable for you. And you're going to be involved because we're going to be respectful of your time. When a board member joins, get a 3-ring binder as an orientation packet that includes a brief history of the organization and an explanation of fundraising and an outline of expectations, including fundraising and their giving. And put a calendar in there so as much as possible they can see what's going to happen during the upcoming year, especially the board meetings they'll be asked to attend. Don't let a board member be embarrassed because they don't know when your organization was founded or who founded it or what city it was in when it was founded or what the 3 main services you provide. Make sure you give it. It only has to be 2 or 3 paragraphs. But give your board members, so they can give donors, the history of your organization and how fundraising works and how their role in fundraising works. It only has to be a total of 5 or 6 pages, maybe. But give it to your board members so they're informed and feel like they matter, because they do. And ask and answer some questions such as, what is our organization's fundraising expectation of each board member? Ask and answer that at every board meeting and in your orientation package. What's the one thing our organization needs but does not have? See if your board can agree to this. What's the one thing we need but do not have? You might be surprised that people have different ideas. And if you have different ideas, the horses are going in different directions. And we all need to agree what our priorities are, especially for the board. What's the one thing we would concentrate on because it's the most important? Why do we need to raise money? Even if your organization is in financial difficulty, it's still worth asking, why do we need to raise money? What's the purpose? What do we hope to accomplish with the money we raise? Again, make sure all your horses are pulling in the same direction. Are we raising enough money? Or more than we can justify? I was on the board of an organization where we had $20,000 in the bank and our expenses were about $200 a year. I asked the question, why are we still fundraising? And the answer was, wow, why are we? We stopped fundraising. Well, kind of. We didn't stop fundraising, but we cut a lot of the normal things we do to encourage people to give. And we lowered the amounts to a ridiculously low amount of what we asked members to give to the organization. And we increased participation by about 30%. We gave a realistic appraisal of our fundraising and we adjusted, and it grew our organization because we raised less money. In this case, we had too much money. And there will be a day when we don't have enough. But for now, we grew our base and we can report to our members that we respond to the changing times, and when appropriate, we fundraise more or fundraise less. And the membership and our donors appreciated that. Are we basing fundraising goals on reasonable expectations? A lot of fundraisers set goals based on last year's fundraising. Well, we need to raise 10% more this year than last year. Is that always justifiable? Is it realistic? Maybe we need to raise 20% more. Maybe we need to raise 20% less. No matter what, are we basing our fundraising goals on realistic and reasonable expectations? A board member is going to ask that because a board member asks that in their day job every day. They're most likely leaders in the community, and that's the kind of question they ask when they're looking at their household or their business. So we need to ask the question as well. Are we being reasonable in our fundraising goals? Are we too high or too low? Are we doing all we can? Is our board, our staff, our volunteers, are we doing all we can? Are we trying too hard or not trying hard enough? Whatever the case, take a realistic look at where we are, what we're doing, and where we're trying to go, and determine if we need more fuel or less, or more horsepower or less, and see what we can accomplish together. Have we taken a fair look at events and the true cost and return for each one? 2020 was a good year to do this. I think we're still doing it now and for the foreseeable future. But take a good look at events and the true cost and return for each one. Some events were terminated in 2020, and it was a very good thing. I know of a number of events around the country that lost money every year, but we've been doing it for so long we can't stop doing it. And this is a charity where people are giving money for the mission that ultimately went to pay the bills for an event that lost money, not made it. If every board member has not included a gift in his or her will, should he or she be on the board? I'm a planned giving person, and I would challenge you that every board member should include your organization in their will or trust or other planned gift. Here's why. You can include a gift in your will for 1% of your estate or 2% of your estate. No family member is ever going to complain they only got 90% of grandma's money. Every board member should believe in your cause enough that they would amend their will to include at least a 2% gift in it to benefit your mission. You can do an IRA gift or any other type of gift that's a legacy type gift, but if I'm on your board, I should have enough passion for what you're doing where I would do something beyond an annual fund gift to show that passion. Again, looking at events, why do we have this event? Even if we've done it forever. I've seen a number of events happen because a particular board member would be devastated if we didn't have the golf event anymore. It's been losing money every year for the last 10 years, and only a few people show up, and none of them are donors. So we don't even have a chance to engage with them in a way that works. The donor is the owner of the corporation, but he always sends employees, or she sends employees, or whoever she can find. And the event is just for people who like golf to play golf or tennis or go to eat blueberry pie or whatever. But every event, everything you do should be seen through this lens. Why do we do it? Even if it's what we're known for and we've been doing it forever. At every board meeting, ask, how's our annual fund doing? And tell them how annual fund is doing. How's our major and planned gift effort doing? And are we training all board members on annual fund? Do they know what annual fund is? Do they know how it works for us and what it does? Are we training them on special events? Are we training them on major gifts so they know what a major gift is and what it means to us? And especially that mysterious planned giving. Do board members understand how important planned giving is to your organization? Train them. Show them. Do I give our fundraisers the tools they need? Yes, the only employee that reports to the board is the CEO, but the board is also aware of how much tools and salary generally goes to the fundraisers. Are they getting the salary, the training, the support they need to do their jobs effectively? And are we paying them the right amount? Too much or too little? The board should be concerned about paying their fundraisers an appropriate salary. And if you train them on what fundraising is, it's easier to find that support. Do all board members understand what the organization expects for personal giving and fundraising? Try to demystify this threshold or this idea that board members give. Take the mystery out of it and tell them what personally significant means and what their role is in fundraising. Here's what we expect you to do. Even though you've given us a gift, we still expect you to help us fundraise by doing blank. It could be inviting us to parties, and introducing us to your friends, whatever it is that works for you and your organization. Make sure that a board member's role is clearly understood by the board member and by everyone who might be involved. What's the average time it takes for a donor to receive a receipt or thank you? There's probably no better gauge on how effective a charity is than how it treats donors following a gift. The number of days or hours it takes, hopefully not weeks, for a donor to receive a thank you is a very clear indicator of how well you're doing. And I propose that at every board meeting, tell your board members what the average time was since the last board meeting. Make sure your agendas are realistic. If you have the board meeting on the agenda for 1 hour and it routinely takes an hour and a half, go ahead and set it from now on at an hour and a half. We're not fooling anyone when we always go late or overrun. Be realistic and stick to the schedule. And again, start and end on time. Your agendas, your timing for every event, and especially board meetings, should be realistic, not aspirational. If everything goes well, we'll end by 8:30. If you know you have somebody on the board or staff that talks too long at a meeting, make sure that you can find a way to politely limit that, or whatever you need to do to make sure your board meetings start and end on time. And we shouldn't do anything with the board or even with the charity or anyone on the staff that does not contribute to the relationship building necessary for fundraising. Everything we do should strengthen that framework that helps us build relationships that lead to fundraising. If we're doing something that is neutral or is hopefully against that, we need to stop it. Everything we do needs to point us to relationship building for fundraising. As we fundraise, remind your board, don't sell the need. It's not what we need, it's what we're going to accomplish together. Sell the success. This is what we'll do together if we do it together. Don't sell the need. Remember, too, that the best fundraisers are active listeners, not active talkers. It's all about listening and not about talking. The best conversationalists I know can sit in a 3-hour conversation without saying a word. That's what it means to be a good communicator, is when you ask the right questions and listen to the right answers. And finally, my parting thought for you is when you talk to your board, when you talk to yourself, remember that we can always learn things in fundraising, and I encourage myself, my staff, my peers to always go to educational sessions like this one. But at the end of the day, and at the beginning of the day, passion beats expertise almost every time. When we're passionate for the cause, we can go to the top, and it's what it takes to make our organizations run well. Hold on to that passion, fire up the passion in your board, and make it emotionally satisfying for them to be a board member and for them to fundraise for us. I want to thank you so much for our time together. I wish we were in person together, but I hope this has been helpful for you. I encourage you to drop me a line. That's my work email address. I'd love to hear from you. If I can ever help you, let me know. And I hope you have a great board from now on. I hope these words have helped you and your board. And I look forward to seeing you next year at ICON in person. Thanks again, and have a great day.